What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Reagan Faulkner Show, but more importantly, happy 2026. We've got midterms, we've got a brand new year, we have the House, the presidency, and the Senate. We're doing great, y'all, but we've got to keep it that way, so just wait. 2026 is going to be a big year for us. I'm so excited for everything that I have planned, everything that's in store. We will be introducing interviews to the show, so be sure to stay tuned, stay locked in, and the Reagan Faulkner Show is going to be better than ever. We have a whole entire year for the show, so very, very excited for that. But what do I want to talk about today? Now, there's a lot to talk about. There's so much stuff that happened over break. Over Christmas, we saw taking the Venezuelan dictator. That's kind of crazy. There was a lot that happened, but I think every conservative podcaster has talked about that at this point. Maybe everybody except Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes, everybody's put a video out about it. I think Brett Cooper's done a video, Matt Walsh has done a video, so I thought we could spice it up a little bit and do what I believe and what I think arguably is the number one threat to America and Western culture, and that is communism. So today we are going to be talking about communism and why it is the number one threat to United States sovereignty and to Western culture as a whole. So let's jump right into it. Since 2008 recession, we've seen a lot of these sort of grassroots liberal organizations and movements that have sprung up and been established. And just to name off a couple, think Occupy Wall Street, think BLM, think Antifa, and there are so much more. Think No Kings. There are so many more that are specific to your local region, to your state, but those are some of our big national ones. Hands Off Venezuela is a new one. So we've seen a lot of these organizations like BLM and a lot of these movements like Hands Off Venezuela popping up since about 2008, 2010. And each of these groups and movements and the groups that are backing these movements, if properly researched, are going to evidence their goals and their objectives. All you have to do is look them up and go to their About page, and what you're going to see is that their ultimate culminating goal lies in revolution, and it lies in racial justice, and it lies in the advancement of LGBTQ agenda, propaganda, whatever you want to call that one, the LGBTQ plus advancement, I guess I should say, and ultimately a devious desire to spread this to youth, which I find almost the most surprising out of all of this. It makes sense, but it's very devious and it's very surprising. So many of these groups classify themselves as youth-based intervention at the grassroots, quote, grassroots level, and these groups are hiding in colleges, they are hiding as kind of youth-based intervention groups, and they're even camouflaged quite well in our public education institutions across the country. They are in many unions, they have camouflaged themselves in almost every facet of our cultural lives, but these are the ones specifically that are targeting our youth, our colleges, our public education institutions, and ultimately, I'm in a swivel chair, y'all, I'm so sorry about that, ultimately, also, just as youth-based intervention, when you're creating youth-based intervention for underprivileged youth and then you are brainwashing them, that's really devious, that's really messed up. So these sentiments have been building for decades, and they finally culminated, and we've seen it for decades. You've heard a lot of people say DEI is Marxist, which it is, and all these other programs are Marxist, and they are, but it's never really culminated, and that's why I think a lot of people haven't believed it. They haven't been okay with it. They haven't wanted to accept it, but it is, and we're finally seeing it, and the communists are finally showing their true colors. So we will go into what they're doing to show their true colors, but let's go into a very brief history of communism, and I'm not talking going into Lenin and Marx and Animal Farm in 1984. When I say brief, we're just talking about what they believe at a very surface level group, and I'm sure many of you have probably studied this for years and decades, and this is just a very surface level overview of what communists believe and generally what their end goal is. So they want equity for all. And mind you, that is not equality, that is equity. There's a very big difference. Equity is outcomes based. So when you are talking about equity, for example, when we're talking about DEI, Equity is saying that everyone has to end up at the same place. So you are taking from one group, you are redistributing the wealth of one group to give to another group that may be less privileged, that may be disenfranchised, that might just be lazy. Whatever the choice is, you are taking from a succeeding group and giving to a different group so that the succeeding group is well off and the other disenfranchised group or lazy group or struggling group or whatever group they are is better off. So that is what equity is. Equality and equity are completely different. Equality is focused on making sure that everybody has access to whatever they need, that they have access to trying to get a job, that they have access to education. Brown versus Board of Ed is about equality, that white people and African Americans have the same access to the same education. Equity is taking from one to give to another, to redistribute wealth, to redistribute success, to redistribute goods and services and products, things like that. It is about the redistribution to have an equal outcome. We're also talking about the eradication of capitalism. That's pretty easy. They want to destroy capitalism. They want to nationalize everything. And that leads us into our next bullet point, which is the national ownership of goods, resources, business, services. Very economic term. They want to take things that are small, locally owned businesses. Think about your favorite restaurant that's not a chain. They want to take that, they want it to be owned by the government. So they want to destroy small business, they want to destroy capitalism, and they want to destroy class. And if y'all know anything, I said we wouldn't get into a history of communism. We're going to jump in a little bit. But if you've ever seen this happen before, you think Animal Farm, you look at Venezuela, there's no class destruction. You just absolutely decimate the middle class. And you have a bunch of super, super, super poor people, and you have a bunch of super, super rich, corrupt people. If you've read Animal Farm, think all the other animals versus the pigs. All the other animals were completely terrible off. I mean, it's been 4 years since I've read that book. I'm pretty sure they faced famine, they didn't have food, they were forced to labor to build that freaking windmill that they wanted so bad. And the pigs had alcohol, and they were hanging out with the humans, even after they said the humans were terrible. Like, they were just living it up while the other animals were suffering. So that is the national ownership of goods, services, products, and businesses. Then we have the destruction of democracy, which again you saw on Animal Farm. They want to destroy your ability to vote for your elected officials, which is really interesting because they are the party of democracy. They love democracy, but at the end of the day, when you look at what they actually want, and again, we are talking about socialists and communists, not your granddaddy's Democratic Party, but they want to destroy your ability to speak for yourself. They want to destroy your ability to have ideological freedom, religious freedom, political freedom. They want to create a ruling class, destroy classness, because yeah, that makes sense, and take away your democracy. And then again, I'll repeat it, the denial of political, religious, and ideological freedoms is another key point of what communism's end goals are. And finally, they have an oppressor versus oppressed mentality. They believe that one group is the victimizer and one group is victimized. And communism cannot exist without this mentality because they can't have revolution without this mentality. There's nothing to revolt against. So in our country, we do have a national communist party. It is called the Communist Party USA. And in 2019, they adopted, quote, the Road to Socialism USA as their program. They hold that today. So when you hear that communists are not socialists or that socialists are not communists, remember that the National Communist Party of the United States of America has developed its programming using the Road to Socialism USA. So I think there's something that needs to be taken away from that. I think that the communists might actually be socialists. Maybe not all socialists are communists, but at the end of the day, socialism leads to communism, so even that one can kind of be retorted. They just might not know it yet. But we also have socialist movements in the USA, which, if y'all are politically active, and I know that you are, you know that the socialist movements are a lot more prevalent than the communist movement. So specifically, one of the biggest ones that we have, that we see, that everyday normal people see, is the Democratic Socialists of America. And if this doesn't ring a bell, this is the party of Zoran Mamdani, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, all of these people fall into the Democratic Socialists of America. And the organization actually celebrates about 250 elected members, and 90% of these people were elected after 2019. You see that number again. That was the year that the Communist Party USA started using their programming as the road to socialism USA. So 2019 is kind of a prominent year for the advancement of communist, socialist sympathies and goals. So why does all of this matter? We just spent 10 minutes talking about communism. Why does it matter? A majority of socialist sympathy groups and communist groups emphasize the need for revolution as their end goal. And we see this with a lot of the political violence that's been going on. In order to achieve their end goal of destroying capitalism, they must utilize revolution. So you wonder, why is there so much political violence rising against conservatives? Why did a lady try to drive her car into an ICE agent today? This will be released tomorrow, the day after. But why did that happen? Why did they shoot Charlie Kirk? Why did they try to kill Donald Trump twice? Why is there so much political violence? It's because it's their literal self-proclaimed MO. They have to incite revolution in order to achieve anti-capitalism. So these groups also campaign their entire movement on the need to destroy fascism. And that kind of explains why we keep seeing the word fascist come up so often. It is a political ploy, but it's also used to fester this oppressed versus oppressor feeling, to catalyze this revolution that they want so badly. And communism can only exist when there is an oppressor-oppressed mentality, aka a common enemy. So sometimes it has just simply been communism versus fascism. That's pretty easy to figure out. It's, Lenin versus Hitler. Pretty obvious there. But today we're seeing it disguised as racial sympathies or reparations or critical race theory. We see it disguised on sexual orientation or transgenderism or the queer ideology. And we see it culminating in this visceral disdain for the capitalistic structure and class hierarchy. And we see this because you hear a lot of leftists or, some Democrats, some liberals, and some are, literal socialists. Now, not Democrats and liberals and progressives. They're not necessarily socialists. They're not socialists. But the socialists are socialists. The self-proclaimed socialists, the far left, super far left, they are socialists. And you hear them being like, oh, we don't like Elon Musk. He's a billionaire. Destroy all billionaires. We don't like Donald Trump because he's a billionaire. They don't like capitalism. It's not a problem that they're a billionaire. They don't like capitalism. Look at Zoran Mamdani not liking millionaires. He is a socialist. He doesn't like capitalism. Look at C. Weaver, his housing or tenant director, whatever she is. She doesn't like capitalism. She wants to take away property ownership. Zoran wants to replace the rigid frigidity of individualism with the warm comfort of collectivism. Like, that is socialism. That is communism. That is a disdain and a hatred for capitalism, because how can you build a company, how can you build a business, how can you have capitalism without individualism? So that is what they're trying to destroy, is this capitalistic and this class hierarchy, this capitalistic culture and this class hierarchy. So why is this the greatest threat to America and the greatest threat to Western civilization? Well, first of all, America is a democratic republic, or, whatever term you want to use. I know that there are multiple, but basically we're not a pure democracy. We are a constitutional republic, or a democratic republic. That was the other one, constitutional republic. Basically, we elect people that represent us. That is America. That is in our founding documents. So if you want to destroy democracy, you want to destroy a democratic republic, you want to destroy the inherent nature of what is America. You want to destroy the great experiment that our founders did back in 1776 and accomplished, I think it was 1805, if my memory serves. No, it was something around there, y'all. I know my stuff, but dates aren't super my thing. But early 1800s, late 1700s was when we got our Constitution. Then we got our Bill of Rights in the 1800s. It was what our founders fought for, was for us to have this representative democracy, this constitutional democracy. It's not actually a democracy in the term that the Greeks talk about. It is representative, where we elect people to represent us so that it's not mob rule. So that is really, at the end, why it's the greatest threat. But let's jump into some more specifics. First of all, they just aren't hiding it anymore. I guess second of all, they just aren't hiding it anymore. That was kind of, first of all, was the democracy part. But we see these hands-off Venezuela protests, and I mean, the attendees and protesters are literally defending a dictator. They're literally, like, if you look it up, they are literally like, oh my gosh, we would rather replace Donald Trump with Maduro. That's wild. That is absolutely wild, y'all, to want to replace Donald Trump, who, like him or not, he's fine. Like, he hasn't done anything. I'm sure there's going to be a comment about Epstein and the Epstein files, but, like, he hasn't done anything. Donald Trump is saving America. He's making America great again. He's mostly America first. He is America first, depending on if you ask a groyper, if you ask somebody that's not a groyper. He's not doing anything wrong. In my personal opinion, he's not doing anything wrong to want to be replaced with a literal dictator. Maduro is a dictator that supported a fake election. He did not leave office. I guess it was a real election. He didn't leave office when he lost. He is a literal dictator. He disregarded the election. He disregarded and abused his citizens, multiple human rights abuse violations, and then he just murdered and disappeared any opposition, political or media opposition. He just disappeared them. He's a literal dictator. Trump has never done anything like that. He is way, 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 way better than Nicolas Maduro, no matter who you are, unless you're a socialist, I guess. But we also just see many left-wing Americans siding with the ideals and groupings that all conservatives are fascists, and that is the oppressor versus oppressed, and many of them probably don't even realize what they're doing. Many of them are socialists and do realize what they're doing. Their organizations are promoting the LGBTQ agenda, which is rooted in Marxism, racial issues, which is rooted in critical race theory, which is rooted in Marxism, and climate change, which honestly I haven't done that much research into climate change. I don't think that one is rooted in Marxism, but they are attracting people because the LGBTQ agenda, racial issues, not a lot of people know that that is rooted in Marxism, and they're attracting them, and they're radicalizing Americans that most likely didn't have communist or socialist sympathies prior to going into these groups. They're like, oh, I have that in common with them, and then boom, they're radicalized. I mean, these people know what they're doing. It's extremely organized. It's like a symphony of Marxism and communism. They know exactly what they're doing, and they've been devising this for decades. And then also, the Socialist Political Party also specifically advertises that they are, or one of them that I stumbled across, advertises they're internationalist in nature. That's kind of wild that you're going to back other countries instead of the country that you live in. Why not go there? Quite frankly, why not go there? Why are you backing and saying on your website that you're internationalist in nature? That's kind of crazy. But when others don't have the best interests of America first, how can we secure our borders? How can we protect our citizens? How can we institute mass deportations that we so badly want to see? How can we correct fraud? And how can we save America when there is an entire sect, an entire political party of people who are internationalist in nature? And we also have that radical socialist policies are brainwashing Americans to accept this mass, unchecked immigration. They are brainwashing Americans into just throwing money at foreign groups and nations. Look at the Somalis in Minnesota. Look at how many people have been brainwashed. There are ICE agents going in there to correct billions of dollars worth of fraud, and that they're trying to drive over the ICE agents. And then they're like, oh my gosh, we stand with the girl who drove over the ICE agent. Like, that's wild. That's literally saving America. They're trying to stop the fraud. And what have they turned into? They've turned it into a race issue, because that is what these groups do. They are organized. They are controlling the narrative. Race equals critical race theory, which goes into Marxism. It is so organized, and there are so many people that aren't socialists, that aren't communists, that are just going along with it because they don't know, because they think it's what their political party does. And it is so sad to watch normal Democrats and normal liberals fall for the scope of what they are, quite frankly, falling for. But we see that. We see them, taking from the rich to give to the poor, redistribution of wealth, kind of in the tax fraud that we've seen. We've seen the promotion of political violence. We've already talked about that in this episode. And then the demanding of radical revolution. We haven't quite seen that one yet, but I think every time that they commit a violent political act, they're trying to test to see what the right is going to do and if they're going to be able to achieve that revolution. Kind of like, I think they had hoped that J6, I think that was a beta testing of our revolution to see how far the right would go, and, we all know it wasn't an insurrection, but that's besides the point, even though yesterday was J6. So, when we think of the left as disorganized, they're only against Donald Trump. They don't know what they're talking about. Oh, no kings! Oh, wait, we like the dictator Maduro. We can't really think of them as disorganized, because when you zoom out, there's an incredibly larger picture that we don't know. We haven't been taught the rules, so we don't know. Because why did the term fascist pop up all of a sudden? It's a communist word. Why are the protests supporting a communist dictator? Because they're communists at heart. Who is paying for these protests? You should look that one up, because allegedly it is somebody that is a sympathizer with the Chinese Communist Party who lives in Shanghai and dumped $20.4 million into the hands-off Venezuela protests. So they are communists. Those are the groups that are paying for these protests. Why is the political violence growing? Because they want revolution. Why are conservatives being gaslit and told that we're the violent ones? Because they're waiting for a reaction. Why is J6 considered an insurrection? Because they are testing to see how far they can push non-communists and non-socialists. Is this language the conditioning for Americans that something worse will happen after J6 or in the future? Probably. They have to tell you what they're going to do before they do it. This is probably 100% conditioning. So all of this is the direct moves and the direct messaging of the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, and the self-proclaimed initiatives of communist socialist sympathizer groups. Now, as the midterms in 2026 looms, we're in 2026, we've got, 10 months before the midterms, probably more like 9 months because they're very, very, very early in November. We need to consider what these protests mean, what these groups mean for our future. There's probably going to be another backup episode or backup TikTok to this because it looks like we're about to have George Floyd 2.0 in Minneapolis. So we have to understand that a game is being played, but nobody taught the conservatives, nobody taught the Republicans, and quite frankly, nobody taught the regular old Democrats, liberals, and progressives the rules of the game that's being played. There's a game that's being played, but nobody's told us what the game is or what the rules are. So what Republicans have to do when Democrats and liberals and progressives that aren't down with the socialist movement need to have strategy, we need to have a level head, we need to do our research, we need to have discernment, pray for discernment, and it really is essential for us to have these things in order to retain control of the House and Senate in 2026. You've seen Trump, he already came out, he said if we lose control of the House and the Senate, they're already going to try to impeach him. Not sure what good that's going to do, because they're going to get J.D. Vance instead, and I think J.D. Vance might be scarier than Donald Trump. I'm not quite sure yet, but they are going to try to impeach him, which would be very, very bad for everything that he's put into place so far. But also, if the government, if mainstream media, if other conservatives and ordinary citizens don't start raising alarm about this, about the communists, about the socialists, about their MO and what they're doing, then we really are going to be hit by a threat that we never even saw coming. We think we're being hit by all these other threats, everything that Fox News is telling you, or if you're a Democrat, that CNN is telling you, or that Donald Trump is telling you, or that the influencers are telling you, or that Nick Fuentes or Candace Owens is telling you. There's so many things we're being told are a problem, but at the end of the day, it is the communist groups in America that are controlling everything. They are controlling all of the left agenda, all of the agenda of Mamdani and AOC and probably Ilhan Omar as well. I mean, they are controlling all of the far left movements in our country. The far, far, far left, not the normal liberal Democrat left. So Yes, mass migration is a crucial problem. Yes, political violence is a crucial problem. Yes, fraud is a crucial problem. Yes, our deficit is a crucial problem. Yes, men and women's sports is a crucial problem. Yes, mutilating young children for the sake of radical gender ideology is a crucial problem. Yes, Obamacare is a crucial problem. But where does this stem from, y'all? Like, where does it come from? Because not even normal Democrats agree with this anymore. We see a lot of Democrats becoming independents or becoming conservatives because this isn't, like I said, it's not your granddaddy's political party anymore. It's not your granddaddy's Democratic Party. It is morphed into a haven of communist socialist sentiment. So it all comes from the ideals, the modern ideals of communism and socialist sympathizers. And it is being artificially pushed by groups that have more financial backing than you can imagine because it's all organized. How do you imagine these protests spring up so fast? You know, a lot of people say that they're bussing in protesters. How would that happen without groups that are extremely organized and extremely well financially backed? So as Republicans, what we have to do as we have to stand against their ideals, stand for our ideals, stand against their propaganda, stand against their lives in order to save the American dream and in order to save posterity. We have to unite as conservatives because I know a lot of conservatives have been infighting. We need to unite as conservatives against the communists because what they have is unity and what the Republicans have always had is a little bit of infighting, and we need to stop the infighting and unite against the common goal, which is saving America, saving the American dream, saving posterity from absolute just can't even imagine in the future, and stop the communists. So thank y'all so much for joining me on today's episode of the Reagan Faulkner Show. If you want more, be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at the Reagan Faulkner Show and X, and check us out on X, Instagram, and Facebook at the Wilmington Standard. If you want merch for the Reagan Faulkner Show, be sure to check it out at thewilmingtonstandard.com, where you can find other incredible articles and podcasts. Thank y'all so much, and I can't wait to see you on the next one.